You know, if you knew him, you knew that probably nothing was more important to Tim in his life than his son Luke. Yesterday, there was a very special Meet the Press that was conducted in Tim's honor, and after the show, Luke came on the set. It was clear, and he touched his dad's chair. And if you know Tim, that picture, that is so hard for a lot of us to look at. It really is. You just have to kind of stop and let that sink in. And I want to say a very special good morning to Luke Russert. Luke, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
How you doing?
You know, hanging in there, take it day by day, but the support from everyone in the NBC family and the general public and my close family and friends has just been unbelievable. My mother and I are so grateful, and we're holding up as best as can be, but it makes it a lot easier with this kind of network around us.
You mentioned your mom. How is your mom?
Well, it's taking it tough. It's definitely taking its toll on her. She grieves like a wife, and I grieve like a son, so it's a different type of grieving, but we're definitely in the same boat. We miss my father immensely. But she's a tough-spirited woman, as you know, Matt. Knows how to get things done, and these funeral arrangements, I think, and staying busy have kind of provided an outlet for her and I to sort of get our mind off of the awful tragedy that's happened in the past week.
You know, Luke, when we got the news on Friday, one of my first thoughts was for Big Russ, a guy we've all come to know because your dad spoke so eloquently about him and wrote so eloquently about him. He's 84 years old. He lives up in Buffalo, and I mean, you've heard it 100 times, Luke. You know, no parent ever expects to see a child go before them. How is he doing?
You know, I spoke to him yesterday, and I think he realized what happened. He's extremely sad. We lost my uncle 2 months ago, who is his son-in-law, who is almost like his second son. So it's been a very difficult 2 months for my family, but especially for him. But he said to me yesterday, he kind of had a good line. He goes, you know, he was like the pitcher, you were the catcher, and I was the umpire, and we lost our catcher, or we lost our pitcher. So he's still in good spirits, and he has that way of speaking from people that Buffalo have, and I think he's holding up okay. And, you know, he has deep faith just like my dad did. And I think his faith in Catholicism will bring him through this, as it will for all of us.
Luke, your dad said to me on so many occasions that one of the reasons he wanted to write about his dad is because when he was growing up, his father was not the kind of guy who was very emotive. He didn't express his emotions easily. He's not the kind of guy who every day said to Tim, "I love you, pal." You know, and I know Tim wanted to tell his father how he felt about him, and that's one of the reasons he wrote the book, but he also made a conscious decision to let you know how he felt about you. And I don't think there was a day that went by that he didn't say something like, "I love you" to you, was there?
Absolutely not. I spoke to him at least 2 to 3 times a day, and it would always be about maybe the election coming up or something to do with sport or just things about life. But I always felt on the other end of that phone line, or just in person, we had dinner, we just sat around shooting the bull. There was always a lot of love from him, and we'd always hug, and you know, he would say the same things he says to all of you guys. You know, go get him, brother, and put his hand across my shoulder. And there's not a day that goes by that I did not know my father loved me. My grandfather spoke more through actions and concrete language and words and emotions, but I believe, you know, my father, being the product of the baby boomer generation, could express emotion, and he definitely did towards me, and for that I'm eternally grateful.
There was a shot we had up, I don't know if you can see what we're putting up here, Luke, but there was a shot we had up a second ago with you in your cap and gown just a few short weeks ago, graduating from Boston College. Let me just play you a real quick clip of the interview I did with your father. It was based on politics that day, but a little moment at the end. Tim Russert in Boston, where young Luke is set to graduate from Boston College. Congratulations, Tim.
I'm very proud to be his dad.
It really was one of his proudest moments, Luke. I hope you know that.
Absolutely, and he couldn't have said it any better. Just proud to be my dad, and I'm obviously proud to be my son. That was a wonderful day for my family. You know, my father never thought he'd have the opportunity to go to college. He worked his behind off to get there and then eventually go to law school. I was fortunate enough to be blessed with the ability to go wherever I wanted to go to school and not have to worry about the financial side of it, and I'm so grateful for him to that. And it was such a celebration. It's almost a chain. You know, you want your kid to do one step better than you did.
Right.
And he kind of told me that after the graduation we had a very special dinner in the North End, and he sort of pulled me aside and said, you know, you one-up me. Congratulations.
Luke, as when you and I spoke over the weekend, I said this to you, and I'm I'm going to say it again for people at home to see. I almost want to be able to grab you by the collar, and I want you to know how often Tim talked about you. I mean, I can't think of a time that I saw your dad or talked to your dad on the phone over the last 10, 12, 15 years where the conversation didn't in some way turn to you. And I hope you know that. And it wasn't in that way. You know how sometimes parents, they talk about their kids too much and it's like, oh, here he goes again. It was never braggadocious. It always then worked into questions about our families. But I just want you to know that he spoke of you constantly.
Well, I appreciate you telling me that, Matt, and that's one thing that's really resonated with me in these past couple of days is everyone comes up and they say, we don't know you personally, but we feel like we do just because how much your father spoke about you. And I really think that he really resonated with kids. He loved kids. You know, jobs, there were always jobs, there were always problems, but he loved kids because they were so sweet, they were so honest. And that's what really was important to him in life. And that's when he had his conversations with you guys. I know you would talk about the election or you would talk about something at work, about whatever new protocol, whatever's going on. But the thing he cared about more than anything was everybody else's kids because he wanted them to succeed just as he did and just as their parents did.
He told me all the stories, Tim. Luke, the Tim stories were legendary, and he told me all about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can't go into the ugly here this morning, but we know the stories. And of course, there was a story where actually he was mortified for a short period of time over something you did, and it turned out to be one of the things that he was proudest of. You got a tattoo. You want to tell me about that?
Well, I was senior year of high school, just sort of going through a growth period, and I was trying to figure out college and everything, and he sort of came up to me and said, you know, wherever you want to go, it's okay with me, and we'll support you 100%. And at that moment, I knew that I always wanted him on my side. And as well as I looked at the manuscript for Big Russ and Me, this was before it really came out, and just read what he had. And I did this secretly. I sort of went into his file cabinet and looked at the first copy of Big Russ and Me before it was in print form, and just read all through that and the lessons he was sharing and the stories about me and my grandfather. And I got TJR tattooed on my side in November of '03. I was a little hesitant, but now it's the best decision
Which is both
of my
of their
life.
initials, I want to mention.
And so they're both on my side, and it'll forever remain there.
Yeah, I think his first reaction was, he did what? And then when he realized what you had tattooed there, I understand he just sat in a chair.
It was actually, I lucked out because he found it on Christmas morning. My mother had given me this new shirt to try on, and I put it on, and the undershirt got caught on top of it, and he saw it. He goes, what the heck is that? And I was like, oh, that's just a scratch I got playing. And then it all sort of came out. But if you're going to, here's my advice to the kids of America. If you have a tattoo, show it to your parents on Christmas, because I can't get that mad.
You said something to me I loved, Luke, that when you and your dad were together, and he used to come up and see you at BC all the time and tailgate, go to the parties when he could. Obviously, he had to prepare for Meet the Press on a lot of Saturdays, but when he could come up there, you said that the age difference when he hung out with you and your friends disappeared.
Yeah, it did. It was truly remarkable. I mean, one of my favorite things I like to say is that my dad would rather drink beer with my college friends and I in the backyard than go to a state dinner. He'd rather go to a tailgate than any ambassador's dinner in Washington. He would hang out with my buddies and I, and it would literally like he was maybe 22 years old, maybe 24, a little older, but he would tell stories about his own college experience. He would hang out, and never once, I mean, some kids are nervous when their parents are around their friends. Never once. I welcomed it. My friends loved him just as much as I did, and it was really fun to have him around. And boy, did he like to eat at those tailgates. That'll be one of my fond memories of him. He used to fly in wings, buffalo wings, from Frank and Teresa's in Buffalo, because people in Boston couldn't do a good wing. That's what he always said.
Did he talk to you, Luke, about what he saw as his role in terms of being a journalist and a broadcaster?
He did. I really honestly believe that he saw himself as the questionnaire for the American people. He obviously did his job for himself, for his network, for his family, but at his core, I believe he had a higher calling, a responsibility to educate the American public about the candidates who seek the highest office in the land. I think he went out there working for the senior citizen in the nursing home who may not understand an issue, a complex issue in the American political system, the single mom who comes home and puts on nightly news. And my dad had that 90 seconds at the beginning of nightly, almost 3 to 4 times a week, and he would try to explain complex things to people and make them better informed voters. And I also think he wanted to hold politicians accountable for the American people. So if he had a higher calling, that was definitely it. And everyone said, why don't you run for office? Why don't you try to move up? He goes, no, this is where I belong. This is what I want to do. And he really is, and I say it's one of the last of the dinosaurs in terms of political journalists who cared about civility, wasn't about the soundbite, wasn't about screaming and yelling. He wanted to have a forum each week where you have a conversation with people so that the American public in general could really get to understand them better and make a better informed decision and hopefully ultimately have a better country.
Yeah, speaking of a higher calling, your mom also has. She's an incredibly accomplished journalist in her own right. And that relationship, how would you describe it? Tom Brokaw says, and we've seen them together, Luke, high octane.